Hey guys, TrainerDC here, coming at you with another video. There was a leak prior to Pokémon Day on February 13th that correctly predicted the new starter trio for Pokémon Winds and Waves. I'll throw it up on screen real quick for those of you who haven't seen it, but interestingly enough, this was not the only correct prediction from 4chan regarding Pokémon Winds and Waves, as apparently there was another post made right before Pokémon Day on Thursday, February 26th, saying the starters are indeed a dog, bird, and lizard, which obviously that is indeed the case with Pom-Bomb, Brout, and Gekwa respectively. They go on to say no, champions will not be available on the 27th, it won't be Shadow Drop despite what everyone else is saying. Not even the data miners know this, so correctly predicting that hey, Pokemon Champions isn't coming out until April, which that was a rather surprising part of the presents in my mind at least. I thought this would have come out now basically because they gotta get going for Pokemon Worlds in August. But not only that, they have an entire section on info that was not in the Pokemon Presents. And obviously, the fact that this post got two things correct with the Pokemon Presents a day before the Presents actually aired means that we have to give this some attention here because obviously there is some level of credibility here. So the rest of this info might actually be real. It's something to definitely keep an eye on at least. So without further ado, let's get into this. The first thing they say is regarding the new gimmick. Apparently the new gimmick is called Rebirth. Rebirth is a new mechanic where once a Pokemon faints, it can be revived with an Omniboost, so basically a boost to all of its stats, so it's like a more powerful version of the Pokemon. It's an item-based mechanic, so they'll need to hold an item. Once they rebirth, they cannot switch out, and some Pokemon have special forms which are called reborn forms. So essentially what this is if a Pokemon faints, presumably once per battle, like we have with Mega Evolutions or Z Crystals or Dynamax, if a Pokemon faints, basically they are going to get resurrected and come back from the dead, and it will be called Rebirth, and presumably this will work with every single Pokemon. But as this post says, there are certain Pokemon that get new forms, they get transformations upon being reborn called reborn forms. I'm not gonna lie, this mechanic is a bit off to me. I don't exactly know how to interpret this. Like, I feel like this is something that I would need to see to really wrap my head around, because I feel like having a Pokemon come back from the dead, come back from fainting, could be a bit overpowered. Like, imagine if you're playing a battle with a friend or a battle online and all of a sudden your Koraidon, let's just say, faints, right? Your Koraidon faints and all of a sudden it rebirths and it comes back from fainting with full health and it has all of its stats boosted. Like, I feel like that would be really overpowered depending on the Pokemon you use it with, and I feel like obviously everyone's going to use it with their strongest Pokemon on their team. Like, for example, if we have a Metagross or a Kommo-o or a Dragapult faint and you have this item on them, they then come back to life. Like, I feel like this would be a game-breaking mechanic, because if you have an uber powerful Pokemon that's extremely hard to take down and then someone finally takes it down after working through 2 or 3 Pokemon within their party, and then all of a sudden that Pokemon comes back to life, I feel like that's overpowered, especially given that they're going to have an Omni boost to all of their stats. So I don't know necessarily how much I buy this. I do think some Pokemon having forms called reborn forms is the right thing to do. It's the right way to go. I feel like that's the thing that's missing with a lot of these more modern gimmicks, is they should have certain Pokemon with exclusive transformations like we got with Gigantamax with Dynamaxing, and like we kind of got with Terastallization, but not really. We only really got it for Ogerpon and then Terapagos. I think they really should have done more of that with Gen 9 and Terastallization, but that's neither here nor there. The post goes on to say we have 2 rivals in this game. One is named Jasper and the other is the gender you don't choose. So essentially, if you choose the male player character, the female player character will become your rival. This is something they've done time and time again within the franchise, not too surprising there. The character being called Jasper, I don't really have much to say about that. We'll have to wait and see what comes of that. It says there's a cute interaction when you transfer a Pokemon from Fire Red and Leaf Green, as Professor Oak returns to Winds and Waves. He looks much older now and has a cane. He's almost completely bald and he wears a black lab coat now with gold pockets. I will say, if this is indeed true, if all of this is correct, That is so cool. If they have a little in-game interaction where you transfer a Pokemon from Fire Red and Leaf Green and Professor Oak returns to the game, that would be amazing to see. That would be so cool. And it also would kind of place Winds and Waves in a certain area of the timeline of the Pokemon franchise. Because obviously, I feel like for the first 5 generations, there was a post that I don't know if I could find it. If I can, I'll put it up on screen. But there was a post long ago before X and Y came out with someone who worked at Game Freak basically saying like this is the timeline for Pokemon, and we had a pretty concrete timeline as to when all the games took place in regards to one another. And I feel like since Gen 6 has happened, they've really stopped touching on that, and we really don't have any sort of concrete timeline for the Pokemon franchise. So the fact here that if in Winds and Waves Professor Oak returns to us, it's a pretty clear indication that hey, these games are taking place far into the future from the original Red and Blue and Fire Red and Leaf Green. And having a fan favorite character like Professor Oak return in this manner is overall just a good thing to be doing. It's a fun little nod to the fans of the older games, like hey, this is a fan favorite character you recognize and he's coming back in Winds and Waves. So I hope this happens, because all around I don't see any downside to this. Instead of Pokemon Ami, the interactions with your Pokemon team is hiking. You can set up a hiking point with your Pokemon and explore with them, almost like a mix of auto battling. You can choose which Pokemon will lead the hike and play as them. I'm kind of confused by this, to be honest. I mean, hiking makes sense, I guess, given that this is a more exploratory region. This is a region that has a vast wilderness and a lot of different biomes, so hiking obviously would be something that probably people would do more so in the tropics than a, metropolis city-like adventure within Pokemon. But I feel like the way this is described here just sounds off to me. You set up a hiking point with your Pokemon and explore with them, and then you control one Pokemon and you play as them. If anything, it makes more sense to set up like a camp, and then you get to interact with that Pokemon within said camp. But I don't know, we'll have to wait and see what that turns into, because hiking sounds weird as a replacement to Pokemon Ami. I don't know, I've never been a Pokemon Ami person. I personally don't really care about that feature within the franchise, but apparently it's getting replaced by a hiking. Probably one of the most interesting portions of this leak, outside of the rebirth mechanic and the Professor Oak potentially returning, is the fact that 5 Pokemon are named here to get evolutions. Apparently Orthworm from Gen 9, Liepard and Mienshao from Gen 5, Goldeen from Gen 1, and Claydol from Gen 3 all get cross-gen evolutions in this game. The thing is, whenever we get specific details about certain Pokemon getting evolutions and it's very in-depth, it's almost always automatically fake. But the fact here that they're only telling details about 2 of them makes this more credible potentially, because they don't know all the details about it. They just know that these Pokemon are getting evolutions. It says that Goldeen looks like a giant koi fish. It becomes a water dragon type, so it would be the same typing as Tatsugiri. I think that Goldeen getting another evolution outside of Seaking would be really cool. I love split evolutions within the Pokemon franchise. Obviously, Scyther is one who has one with Skeezor and Cleavor. This happened very recently with Pokemon Legends Arceus a few years back, so I would be all over Goldeen getting another evolution outside of Seaking that turns into a giant koi fish that's a water dragon type. I believe Seaking, correct me if I'm wrong, but Seaking is a pure water type, so it'd be cool to see this differentiation between Seaking and whatever this new Goldeen evolution is. Then it says Orthworm evolves into Rustarome, which is interesting that we have a name for it, which again, typically I would say whenever we get too many details regarding a new Pokemon or evolution, I'd say it's fake, but this is only for this one Pokemon in Rustarome. Apparently it looks like a giant subway train with a giant midsection, and sometimes it eats its own tail. It sounds like a more goofy mon, and I don't know how I really feel about this. I saw on the Reddit post where I found this on initially that someone said this is like Locomon in Digimon, which I just played Digimon Time Stranger a month ago, so it's kind of odd to me to be hearing that there would be a train Pokemon, but it's also something I could very easily see them doing. And we had this happen in Gen 9 where we had Duraludon get an evolution and Archaludon in the DLC, so this is not something that's completely out of the question here. Other than that though, regarding Liepard, Mienshao, and Claydol, I think Liepard Liepard getting an evolution is a good thing. I think that'd be really cool to see an extension of that line. Same thing with Mienshao. I think it'd be cool to see an evolution for that Pokemon. I'm curious to see what they would do with it. It's kind of interesting that they're going back to, if this is indeed true, a lot of Gen 5 mons, because obviously within Scarlet and Violet, we got the evolution for Bisharp and King Gambit, which is an evolution that I really like. And just generally speaking, I feel like a lot of the Pokemon that have been revisited lately, such as the Paradox forms for both Scarlet and Violet, were a lot of Gen 5 and Gen 2 Pokemon. So if this is indeed true, it's interesting to see that the Gen 5, I don't want to say pandering, but the Gen 5 spotlight is being continued. And lastly, apparently Claydol is getting an evolution, which I think that'd be pretty cool. I mean, I don't want to say Claydol is a forgettable Pokemon, but I kind of feel like it is. I don't really think of Baltoy or Claydol that much when I think of, just Pokemon in general. I feel like those are some of the last Pokemon I would think of. I know that there's a Claydol card that was reprinted for the 25th anniversary that apparently was really uber powerful back in the day, but I think Claydol getting a new evolution would be really cool. But yeah, this is the post from February 26th that correctly got two aspects of the Pokemon Presents right. So there is a possibility that the rest of this is also correct. There's a possibility that the rest of this is made up. But given that they got two things right out of the Pokemon Day presentation, we have to highlight this and keep our eyes on this, because there's a possibility that all of this is correct. And if that is indeed the case, I find the rebirth mechanic to be rather interesting, because I think it's going to be a little bit overpowered. Professor Oak returning is really cool, and these new cross-gen evolutions, I'm a fan of all of them, quite frankly. I think Orthworm, Liepard, Mienshao, Goldeen, and Claydol all sound like amazing candidates for cross-gen evolutions. Anyways, let me know down in the comment section below what you guys think about all this. What do you guys think about the possibility of this leak from 4chan being real? Do you think that it is real, given that they got the starters correct and also the Pokemon Champions release date correct? Or the fact that it didn't come out on the 27th correct, I should say? Or do you think they were just lucky with those as guesses and the rest of this is a load of malarkey and is made up? Let me know down below. If you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to see more content like this from Trainer DC. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.